All right, what's up, Ryan? How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good, man. Thanks for being on. Excited to talk to you because you got some cool things that you write about. Uh, I mean, well, okay, your book is AI 101,
Yeah.
Primer on Using Artificial Intelligence in Education. So, I mean, how did this come about? How did this book happen?
So I've been in the academic world most of my adult life. I started out, I felt like, my calling was originally in journalism, and I
Okay,
thought I'd be super famous, and none of those things happened.
not yet.
No, and so I found my way into teaching as a favor. I had an awesome professor, super inspirational for me, and really kind of a great mentor. And he asked me to come start teaching night classes for him
Hmm.
at a community college. I was a non-traditional student, all those kinds of things. I worked my way kind of through traditional academics, struggled a lot as kind of a student. Yeah, it came into my blood. I love teaching. I love working with young people, and it was just something that really kind of ignited a whole lifetime of work into academics. But I've always kind of been a bit of a computer nerd.
Uh-huh.
Um, I love gaming. I love technology. I'm that guy that runs out and buys the new gadget as soon as it's available on the market,
Right.
much to my bank account's dismay.
Hmm.
So I go do all those things, and AI was just kind of a natural topic that made its way into higher education. The book itself really came from a place of, unfortunately, fear. Um,
Okay.
great deal of my colleagues, a great deal of my students are terrified of AI. I think a lot of people have this question in their minds of, is Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator is going to start walking around any day now?
Hmm.
Or my job's going to disappear, or all those big concerns that are floating around about artificial intelligence. And I really felt very different. I wasn't really afraid of it. I was really excited about it. So
Hmm.
I wanted to kind of put together a book for those folks that maybe are not the super geek. They're not out there buying the new gadgets, and they're in higher ed, or they're in academics, and they want to kind of understand what this is all about in a safe and not really a fearful kind of way.
Hmm. Okay, sweet. Yeah, I mean I was born in 93, so went, kind of going through school in, early 2000s, and we had like the technology we had in class was like these smart boards,
Yeah,
Yeah. But
absolutely.
the thing was none of the teachers used them. They just sat there and they used them as a normal whiteboard. So I could see it being a little difficult to get educators to hop on the technology bandwagon.
Oh, sure. There's actually a funny story in my career about smart boards. I actually almost got fired because of a controversy around smart boards.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I had one of my first administrative appointments. As educators, sometimes we refer to going to the admin side as the dark side of the force. But I really felt like I could make a bigger impact if I kind of worked my way up to an administrative role. And so I worked for a really kind of a smaller school district, and I was against smart boards.
Okay.
It was a horrible investment, and they wouldn't get used. And at the time, the prevailing opinion of the campus was complete opposite. Like, we had to have smart boards, and these things were really going to be closely integrated into curriculum, and students were going to love it, and it was going to transform how we taught everything. And so, finally, I just gave in and said, okay, let's make the investment and let's move into this category. And I think this is a really kind of a good analogy that you've brought up, in that sometimes there's a lot of hype around technology and it just doesn't pan out the way people think it's going to go. Uh,
Yeah.
the funny part about that story is, fast forward many, many years, and it's my understanding that all those smart boards that were purchased by that particular entity, they ended up going into like a yard sale. So it was like a surplus equipment sale.
Oh
And
my God.
yeah, so they collected a lot of dust and those sorts of things, but they certainly didn't replace teachers. They certainly, didn't kind of turn into these evil robots that were taking over the classrooms and those kinds of things.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I on the my last episode I talked to a guy who has the a podcast called The History of the Internet,
Sure.
and we talked about how it's like in the late 90s, there was like this promise of the internet and everything that we could do, like e-commerce and purchasing and, sharing photos and all this stuff. But it's like you could see the vision and what was possible, but the technology just wasn't quite there. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of why the bubble popped and everything. And then now we're starting to see that stuff because the technology is catching up. So his thoughts were that we're kind of maybe we might be on the same cusp with AI.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
totally agree with your colleague. We're certainly at a tipping point, and the reason that we're at a tipping point is data. Um,
Hmm.
Artificial intelligence is actually just really fancy math, and I think a lot of people don't quite, go down that path when they try to conceptualize it. They think that artificial intelligence truly is this robot that's going to appear in your house and it's going to, cook you meals and you know be able to predict the future and do all these kinds of things. It's very fancy math. And it shouldn't scare you. You should be super excited about the fact that there are people and machines out there now that are so smart that they can do things, better than an individual can do and faster and more efficient than we've ever been able to do in human history. And
Hmm.
all this data that's been collected from working in a world and living in a world where we're so connected is really what has made kind of AI possible to become this thing that's super valuable, and it doesn't become the next smart board. Uh,
Right.
these kinds of technologies, they depend on the sense that what you have are tremendous data sets and data pools that you can lean on to actually collect things like predictive analytics. And so a lot of the times when you see a company, they're advertising a product and they say, hey, this is AI enabled or this is an AI solution, what they're ultimately talking about is really, really fast math, calculating a lot of data that's now available.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess this might be like a few questions rolled into one, but
Yep.
do we have is like real AI around today? Uh, are there like different levels of AI?
Yes, 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 and yes.
Okay. Okay.
Real AI is around today.
Okay.
It's very much in its infancy. So if you want to dig down into kind of the minutia of what real AI is we're talking about a machine that's capable of making its own decisions. It's capable of having autonomous action, and it does that in such a way that it mimics how a human being may do that.
Okay.
So that kind of gets into the true things of artificial intelligence. And there are researchers out there that are doing some fantastic things with artificial intelligence. And they're kind of where you really see it the most is they're trying to pair that with robotics. So you get into the sense that you have essentially an avatar or an entity that can kind of cohabitate with you and do some interesting things and has a personality. And that
Hmm.
kind of personality tends to change and evolve based on the algorithms that are in the machine. So those things are very real. Um, One of the more fun activities that you might want to put on kind of your podcast for your viewers is there's some great material out there where they have researchers that take two artificial intelligence systems and have them have a conversation with each other, and you kind of watch it just degrade very quickly into almost Mad Libs. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, it's wild. And the questions that they're asking each other are only based off of the depth of knowledge of previous questions that have been given to the system. That's
Uh-huh.
no, they haven't really, had life experience like you and I have had. They don't really have emotional states like you and I have, or those sorts of things. So they ask really kind of unusual questions, and you quickly see that you shouldn't be afraid of this thing. It's kind of clunky. It's still relatively new.
Uh-huh.
The second part of your question, when you're talking about levels of AI, absolutely true. Uh,
Okay.
the narrow band of AI is what everybody's used to now, and most people have it in their pocket. If you've got a smartphone that uses either the Google or the Apple platforms or some of the other ones that are out there, and you're making grocery lists or you're asking for directions or those sorts of things, that's a narrowband AI. It's able to take certain rules and put them together and try and give you an answer based off of statistical probability. So if I ask my phone, where's the closest sub sandwich shop? It would look for close, so it's looking for proximity to where I am, and
Mm-hmm.
a definition of close. Is that 10 miles? Is that 100 miles? And so
Okay.
it'll take that approximation and make a decision. And then it'll say, okay, well, we know sandwich and we know sub. So it'll look for those two words and it'll put it together. And then sometimes it'll look for some fanciful things like maybe ratings. So are there social media ratings that are 3-star to 5-star? Those sorts of things. Is the store open? Did they publish their hours online? And it gets to kind of that depth of analysis to say, hey, you need to go down to Joe's Subs, which is right down the street. They're open. They have high ratings. The middle tier of AI is, I think, what's most exciting for people right now. And these are systems that are truly capable of some predictive analysis or some decision making. You see
Okay.
a lot of it right now in the health sciences. So with something like oncology, you can take millions of images that show different healthy cells and cancerous cells or benign tumors or cancerous tumors or all those different factors, and they can analyze it very rapidly. So you can get to a cancer diagnosis, a very accurate one, very quickly now. When in the past, it took a lot of human intervention to try and make an educated guess at it. But that doesn't, necessarily constitute care. We have to be kind of careful about that. I can't tell you that AI is a better oncologist than your oncologist. That's a dangerous statement.
Right.
And then you have kind of this advanced, sophisticated tier, which is kind of the science fiction that everybody's talking about. And this is artificial intelligence that can basically feed itself.
Okay.
It can create other intelligences, and it can learn, and it can compound, and it can grow really without a lot of human intervention. So that gets into the really kind of stuff that's still far out there.
Okay. Interesting. And then so I guess what's the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Good question. So machine learning is kind of a subset of artificial intelligence.
Uh-huh.
And remember, I was kind of talking about that fancy math.
Yeah.
So machine learning really is just awesome math. And I'm not a math guy. I'm a technologist in the sense that I know how to use the stuff. And I try and come up with different endeavors of how to use it in pretty much different or innovative ways. But I certainly don't myself sit down and write thousands of lines of code or those kinds of things. I write books and put them on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my wheelhouse. But with machine learning, what I can tell you is the objective behind it is to look at things like if, and, or statements. So, for example, we could talk about autonomous cars.
Mm-hmm.
That's a super hot topic right now. If you follow Tesla or you're looking at some of those other companies about what's happening, people are very interested to see how that's going to change our lives. And with a self-driving car, the if, ands, or ors, or those sorts of things, it's all very deep machine learning. So it's got cameras on it. It's got radar and LiDAR and depth sensors and speed sensors and all of the Internet of Things sensors bolted onto this equipment. And the AI has parameters that say, hey, if there's a blob in front of you, stop. So what it does is it does that very, very quickly and very, very efficiently. And then it gets into more depth saying, what is the blob? Is the blob a tree? Is it a human being? Is it a building? Is there a road around the blob? Can I go right? Can I go left?
Mm-hmm.
How quickly should I stop? Should I, hit the brake immediately, or should I slowly push on the brake to slow the vehicle down? So
Okay.
all of these kinds of parameters in depth are examples of machine learning algorithms that are all compiled into the artificial intelligence that makes the self-driving car do what it does.
Wow, interesting. And then so is it actually kind of learning the more that it goes through things?
In some ways, yes.
Okay.
If you had the means and you went out and you bought yourself a new Tesla,
Mm-hmm.
and you put in some of the self-driving modes, there are some reporting mechanisms that will beam that information back to Tesla, and Tesla will then take it and put it into a big fancy server and do even more fancy math, and start looking at how they can grow and make that system more sophisticated based on feedback. At the individual level of the car or the vehicle itself, there really isn't a whole lot of new learning happening. It's just actually taking those parameters and making actions based on those parameters. So it's not the case that, your car is going to be a better self-driving car than your neighbor's car because you drive it more often.
Okay.
They both still have to beam back to some centralized place where, their decisions are made on how to update that software, and then all of the cars will be equally as sophisticated.
Okay, so the car that has 300,000 miles isn't 3 times as smart as the
No,
100,000 mile car.
no.
Yeah,
It's
no.
all the same software. They're all going to behave exactly the same way.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so let's get into how AI can help, with education.
Oh, sure. So it's a scary kind of thing, right? If you were like me, I don't know if you like school or not. I was not a fan of school, so
I
it's
was
almost
I was like so about it.
so about
Some
school.
things, yeah.
Okay, but you didn't say, "Wow, school is my favorite thing in the world."
No,
Uh,
definitely not.
so a big part of my job is to try and change that paradigm and make sure that students today say, "Wow, school was my favorite."
Uh-huh.
And that's a tough endeavor. And I'm a tough customer because I hated school and I'm very critical of the quality of education and how things are done. But I'll start with kind of a simple question. So, a big part of school today is you'll write a paper or create a presentation and you'll give that to a faculty member. And that person will grade and assess it and give it back to you and say, here's what you got right, here's what you got wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Did you learn a whole lot? And did you really have the opportunity to benefit from your teacher's experience? And did you really learn what you wanted to learn or what you were curious about? Or were you just kind of going through a process?
Right.
So, for artificial intelligence in education, the real value, the true prospect, is to give teachers and students more time to do the things that truly matter about education. And that's being able to kind of really have a personalized approach for every student. So things like, grading papers and just kind of looking at mechanical things, those can all be quickly automated with artificial intelligence. Uh,
Okay.
we've seen this technology for actually a really long time in academics.
Mm-hmm.
If you've taken an online class, for example, you probably use something like called a plagiarism checker. And essentially what that does is it took that paper and it looked for patterns of different words and how you put those together. And it goes out into the interwebs and looks for all of that data and comes back and says, within a percent of likelihood, this is either an original paper or, the student was super lazy and did the Wikipedia copy paste and just hoped that nobody noticed.
Yeah.
So there's an early benefit of how artificial intelligence has been able to kind of quickly automate that process. So now faculty have more time to work with students on, original concepts and original things that they want to learn. So I think it's the personalization of education that AI just opens the door for new possibilities on. And it'll truly be those kind of mechanical things that you'll start to see go away. And you'll see things like what's called competency-based education continue to emerge and grow. So we're not looking at, well, did you do what we told you to do in the way that we told you to do it? Or did you learn a discipline or a skill where you can actually go out and do multiple kinds of things? You get a degree to get a job. That's
Mm-hmm.
100% a true statement. So if you get a degree, you're basically demonstrating I have expertise in this particular area, and I should be pretty capable at doing this job. You get
Right.
an education to be able to do any job. And fundamentally, that's the biggest change. And, if you're a quality institution or, a quality school district, you're really focused on education and not necessarily just diplomas or degrees.
Okay. Interesting. So do you think that applies more than for elementary, middle, and high school stuff, or does just the general education also apply to college-based learning?
I think it's across the board.
Okay.
The universities, not surprisingly, tend to be early adopters with technology,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the age group that they work with are usually young professionals or adults, and they're probably using that technology in their workplace, or they've brought something in. They have a high degree of confidence that they want to encounter that. The only real kind of change to that are things like gaming and entertainment. So a lot of technologies kind of start in that realm.
Oh,
Video games have been using artificial intelligence for a very, very long time, even my generation. So I'm a Gen Xer. So we played this really awesome game called Oregon Trail,
uh-huh.
and essentially the idea behind it is you get out on your horse-drawn wagon and you're going across the Oregon Trail, and all these circumstantial things happen to you. So the wheel falls off, or you run out of food, or you have to go trudging through a river, or these kinds of paradigms. So you would have to get different resources, and whether you had those resources or not, against the circumstances that popped up, ultimately determined if you would be successful at the end of the game. So as students like me went through and had these kinds of games at home, when we went to school, it changed how we learned.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to ultimately benefit from learning in kind of that gamified environment. So a lot of students today who are doing maybe esports, or they're playing games like Fortnite, which are actually incredibly complicated games. It's a very complicated simulation environment where you're looking at interaction, interplay, resources, how do you manage all those things.
Yeah.
And when you go into middle school or even elementary school or high school, you've already been learning in that fashion for a long time. So those schools, recognize that. At the secondary level, they've been looking at gaming for a very long time. So personalized learning technologies that use artificial intelligence have been around accordingly. So you'll see some of that as well.
Okay. Interesting. So, can you try to take me through like what, I guess first of all, what a teacher would kind of experience with like the AI technologies that you would like to see them with, or like hopeful that they would have, like the benefits they would have with that, and then similarly, like how a student would benefit, like what their day would look like with the technologies you hope to get in there.
Sure. So teaching is a hard job,
Yeah.
um, and most of the time it's kind of a thankless job. You
Mm-hmm.
know, societies expect teachers in schools to do a lot of things. It's really a lot more than just saying, well, did my kid learn how to do math, or did my kid learn how to spell, or those sorts of things. It's social dynamics. It's how you make friends. It's how you behave and interact and communicate. Schools become a hub of community activity where they're deeply involved in things, everything from sports and things that happen on weekends and how people interplay and interact, to how they affect quality of life and living. Universities go so far as to create new drugs and do new research. And teachers, in the mix of all of this, have to
Mm-hmm.
be able to keep up with their discipline. So they've got to be able to be kind of the captain of their industry and be well read and recognize the trends and how kind of their discipline has changed and evolved. And they have to care about each of those students that they have to make sure that they've made meaningful progress from day one all the way until they leave the class or they graduate. So
Mm-hmm.
in order to accomplish those things, you really kind of need some supporting technologies to help you understand where each student is. So what I would love to see happen with AI, and I think you're seeing some early examples of this, is what if you were a teacher and you knew right away, before a student even showed up in your class, what they were really interested in? Or, for example, where did they ultimately struggle, or where did they ultimately succeed in the scope of sequence of things? So, me, I already mentioned this, I'm terrible at math. I'm not a math guy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I've always been okay writer and a pretty good communicator. I was the talk too much in class kid. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it was always this notion of rediscovery. So I would go into, a new grade level and work with new teachers. And unless they really dug in and looked at my academic record for the last, 10 years, or unless they talked to my parents or asked me or kind of did this really in-depth research about me as an individual, they're really firing blind. And so
Yeah.
it took a while for them to get to know me.
Hmm.
So you have this kind of data today in the retail market. So if I go to a retail store and I have any kind of a membership card or a discount card, they know a lot about me.
Yeah.
They know pretty much where I live. They know probably how much money I make. They know typically if I'm in a relationship or not. They know what I buy, how often I buy it. They can even extrapolate if I'm super cheap and I only buy things on sale, or if I'm kind of a fancy pants and I only buy organic and the most expensive thing on the menu. So
Hmm.
all that data is out there, and people are customizing retail experiences for us right now based on that. And I think academics will come right along with that. So it should
Okay.
be the notion of me being able to look at a student holistically and understand what their motivations are, what their passions are, and where they're struggling, where they can go. There's some technologies that have been around for a while, but they're getting even more sophisticated now that look at intervention. So if I'm a student and I don't pass Algebra 1 and I take it twice and then I get into Algebra 2, and if we've learned through all these great sophisticated analytics that 80% of students who fail the week 2 exam don't pass the class at the end, and we have that kind of data just basically given to us in a report right away where I don't have to do any data mining, I don't have to be a data scientist to figure this out. I know right away, let's have a study group and let's meet with this person individually, and maybe there's a test retake, maybe there's a possibility where I can do that intervention and I can personalize that education approach so that they're going to be successful. So I think it's offloading some of those challenges that really teachers don't have time to do right now.
Hmm.
They've got so much pressure on them. The notion of being able to sit down and do a learning plan that has that much depth and detail is almost an impossibility without the technology.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So it kind of comes in with giving them more data, giving teachers more data that's easy to access and understand
Sure.
and is relevant to them. And then it also comes in, kind of eliminating, the test grading, the, just mechanical tasks. Just and then with the idea being that they have more time to focus on the students and you know, teaching. But does the way that they teach change at all?
Sure. Oh yeah, those dynamics absolutely change.
Okay.
Um, and some disciplines it's easier than others.
Okay.
If I'm learning how to build bridges,
Hmm.
the laws of physics don't change. You have to teach how to build a bridge, step 1 to step 100. And those kinds of mechanics stay the same, but it opens up a realm of possibilities. So if those things don't change, and I know that every student has to know tensile strength and different structural formulas and those sorts of things over and over again, and unless we get new elements or new gravitational pull or new physics, those things can be taught by software. Those things can be taught by good math. They can be taught by automated online learning tools and those sorts of things. But it gets back into a bit of a philosophical question. Does that mean it's a good bridge? Does that mean it's a beautiful bridge? Does that mean that you can sell that bridge to a client? Does that mean that you understand how to plan the project and be successful with it? No. So just because you can build a bridge doesn't mean that you're actually going to be successful in that endeavor. So when I work with a faculty member who has a lot of experience in bridge building, it opens up the door for them to tell me stories. It opens up the door for them to make things more project-based or more specific. So I have now the opportunity to say, well, why don't we go build a bridge? And instead of spending our class time going through all these mechanical things where I'm giving you content, you're receiving content. You're saying you received the content. I'm verifying you received the content. We're actually focusing on that human interaction time that we have with each other for true mentorship, for true coaching, for looking at the skills that we really need. I heard somebody say this one time when they were talking about the future of work in AI. And they said that essentially artificial intelligence can do a task, but it cannot do a job. So in order to prepare a student for a job, the interactions that teachers have with them have to be phenomenally different than they are today, because really we're slogging through a lot of task work right now instead of really having the opportunity to do mentorship and coaching.
Okay. So is it kind of like where, we can use AI and technology and maybe give a kid an iPad or something to teach them like the basic stuff, just
Yeah.
you need to learn this stuff to start, and then the real class time is used for like actual communication, stories, and
Yeah.
I don't know, elaborating on that stuff, I guess. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can do a real simple example. So we can talk about kindergarten. So in
Okay.
kindergarten, you learn things like the seed grows up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. So you learned a little bit about biology. You learned something that is unchanging. So whether you had, 10 different faculty members are going to teach that concept pretty much the exact same way. And the test is going to ask the exact same question, and you're going to arrive at the exact same outcome.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that you're actually going to be successful going out and planting a garden. So to actually execute on that, you have to know a lot of things that are a lot more humanistic and environmental that AI can't do for us. And so those
Mm-hmm.
things are based on experience. Those things are based on phenomenally what academics is truly about. And it's truly about that, that mentorship, that opportunity to kind of transform things in your mind and think about possibilities that you probably wouldn't have thought of before. So yes, the seed grows up, but there's a lot of dynamics inside of that. So do we want to teach new biologists, well, this is how you grow plants? Or do we want to say, you're going to learn how to grow plants. We're going to verify that you're able to do that. But now these higher level skills that are a little more in depth is we need to start talking about how we can grow a lot more plants a lot more efficiently. Why do we need to grow more plants? Well, we've got huge population growth, and we're not growing any land, so we only have a finite amount of space to grow that land onto. Let's talk about environmental conditions. Let's talk about the moral upstream and downstream of how labor forces are treated. So all of those kinds of things, you can't teach all that at kindergarten. I understand that, but all of those dynamics require time and require opportunity. So if you can kind of reduce this mechanical load that faculty and students have, you really open up a whole new realm of possibility.
Okay, I see. And then like maybe in your vision, or what you've seen practically, would you teach like in say for in the kindergartner, would you teach them that the seed grows up? Would that be like a in class thing that everyone's doing on some sort of screen or something, or would that take
Uh,
place at home, or what's?
yeah, it would probably be something that took place at home. It would probably be something that, it was a homework assignment. You want to maximize human to human interaction.
Uh-huh.
It's funny. The more technological we get, the common thread between human beings is we want to feel more connected to another human being.
Yeah,
And it seems like the more technology we make, the more barriers and the less we feel connected to other people.
totally.
So you kind of have to respond to that in a phenomenally different way by saying, what can this new technology do for us to improve and to up our game? The jobs aren't going to go away overnight with AI. Is it true that things in like the manufacturing sector or those lower level tasks that we're burdened with today are going to be automated? Yes, of course it is.
Hmm.
And rightfully so. In lieu of doing that, we can't actually progress and up our game as intelligent beings, right? So I'm reminded of like ATM machines. So when ATM machines came out, this is a well documented thing. people were losing their minds. They thought the banking industry was going to be totally, upended, and all these people were going to be out of work. But really what happened is if you used to be a cashier and you were doing kind of customer interaction, simple customer interaction, now you sell financial products. Now you educate other people on how to manage an income, on how to make investments, on doing all of those things. Mm-hmm. So it really just opened the door for higher order thinking. So in terms of, when those activities happen, they can happen anytime, any place, anywhere, any device. And the profusion of technology, the availability of technology is, really kind of driving some of that too. Maybe a student learned that in a game. Maybe they learned that as in an entertaining way. But if you really want to maximize, learning from another human being, you got to kind of change the order of what you're focusing on.
Mm-hmm. Man, this is awesome. This sounds it sounds great. So, and it also sounds like we're kind of almost there technology-wise.
Yeah. We're at an interesting tipping point. We've had technology for a long time, and a lot of people are using a term called Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution. Uh-huh. And that gets beyond digitization and computerization. That kind of happened in the 80s and the 90s. And now we're to a point where you have to ask a really tough question. And the question is, when will the most defining technological event in human history occur, and what will it be? I would argue it's already happened. So if you look at, some of the early things with maybe IBM's computers that play chess, or there's an awesome documentary that talks about a game called Go, where they built an AI algorithm to play this very sophisticated game that's played in Asia. Where you have all these different dots and you build circles and squares and you kind of compete against each other. It's Stratego the nth degree. I mean, there's millions upon billions of possibilities of how to play this game. And they've taught machines how to kind of figure out these different approaches and algorithms. So those things have already happened. And it's really already put us into this process where it could ultimately be our saving grace, or it could be, our demise. So I think kind of, the birth of accessible and, affordable artificial intelligence systems is probably the most single important event for technology in human history. And it's going to chart a whole new endeavor of where we go.
Man, cool. So how does this stuff practically start to get into the classroom? Is it just that, school districts and universities need to make the investments in this stuff and then educate the teachers on how it all works and how to use it?
That's kind of a big motivator for the book. It's easy to be sold some snake oil. And it's easy for a lot of people to say, well, this is AI. And you know what? If you have this AI, you're going to be the smartest person in the room. Your school is going to be the best that there is, just because you planted the flag and you're waving it and it says, artificial intelligence. Those things are totally not true. And you have to be very careful about it. But, I mean, I saw the other day that there were 9,000 AI companies that started in the last year.
Whoa. Wow.
9,000. But of all of those AI startups that came out, I also read that less than 20% received any venture capital funding or any real investments from people who know what they're doing in terms of startup capital. So that should tell you that there's still kind of a lot of smoke and mirrors out there about, what's happening. So the place that you start is always, with your students and what your goals are. I think a lot of schools are looking at how they can solve simple problems just to kind of get into this space. The most common thing that you see a lot of are chatbots. So, if you're a student, it's a huge benefit for you, particularly in higher ed. You need simple questions answered. So, is the coffee shop open at this time? Who do I go talk to about making sure my schedule is set up for next term?
Mm-hmm.
Where do I pay my tuition bill? If I want an appointment at the career center, all these kinds of mechanical things. Historically, the students got to go to 9 buildings. They got to talk to 3 different people. It's a very frustrating process, and it takes you away from that focus of what you're supposed to be in school for to start with, which is really to learn and to develop this spark of passion into a career. So AI can solve those things, and it also can make school more affordable. So I think that's a huge factor. So a lot of schools smartly are looking at artificial intelligence to reduce cost. So if they can do business operational things, if they can do things that create tuition overhead, any improvement areas on that are going to continue to make education more accessible for students and for everybody. And that's ultimately where you'll start to see the first pieces of value. If I were a teacher and I wanted to get started today with artificial intelligence, I'd start with that chat bot. I'd get some of those cool, either the Google or the Apple or whatever product you want. Voice enabled gadgets, you can get those super cheap. You can program them yourself. You don't have to know how to write code. You can download an app and put rules in there and write sentences and make it respond in certain ways, and start teaching your students about how these things work. They're going to encounter them in the workplace. They're going to encounter them at home. Start having the important conversations about, what is this going to mean for us? How do we do this in such a way that we create positive social change? How do you kind of navigate that? That's accessible, and it's something that people can do right now.
Yeah, cool. And what I like about this too is it's not like, I don't know if there was ever really a fear in people about this, whereas like technology and even like online learning is just going to get rid of teachers completely.
Oh, yeah, that's a real fear.
Okay.
That's a real fear. And to the extent that I have seen people have these deep, heated discussions that, they get into religious and spiritual discussions about, machines don't have a soul, and like some just like crazy in-depth kinds of things. And those are great philosophical conversations to have. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to have an adult beer cocktail beverage and sit around and talk about those things. But it's really not practical, and it's really not what's actually happening out there. I think there's so much trepidation because it truly does come from Hollywood and from sci-fi. And so, they say, oh, well, AI is here, and, people are going to be replaced by these things. Yeah, not quite. When you start actually looking at, the dollars and cents of it, and you look at the real capabilities of the technology, we're not quite there yet. There's still a lot of barriers to kind of get that far. To dissuade the fears, I think it's just really important for people to understand and to recognize that this really is about solving simple problems quicker, and what we can do to make the world even better than it is, today. We have really big problems that we've got to solve. And those problem solvers are going to come from the students of today, who are kind of unfortunately inheriting a mess. Whether that is, affordable education, or the energy crisis, or food, or environmental things. All those are real big problems. And I don't know about you, but since I'm not really a good math guy, I want that artificial intelligence on my side to help me kind of tackle some of those issues. We're not going to get there just by kind of getting out, these old Casio calculators. This is solar powered. This was hot stuff at one point. That's not going to help me solve those big toothy problems. So I need these new tools. And we invented these new tools so that, we can solve these challenges. So I think people should just kind of get excited about it and embrace it.
Cool. Yeah. So, what is kind of the future of AI? Are we going to get to that third level you talked about before, where it's just kind of a general intelligence?
Wow. I think so. I think
Okay.
it'll happen. The thing to watch is look at what a lot of the governments are doing, and look at what a lot of the big technology companies are doing to try and get down that path. The
Yeah.
European Union just a couple of months ago released really the first document of its kind, which was kind of an ethical guideline of what you ought and ought not to do with artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So my hope is that we actually get past some of these philosophical questions, and we've got really good parameters to work with. Um, it's always been a historical truth that it's easier to do evil than it is to do good. Breaking things is simple, building things is hard. That's never changed. It's not different for the automobile or the smartphone than it will be for AI. Smartphones, have found people who are lost in the woods, who would have otherwise died and starved alone. And they've also had the sophistication to create, unfortunately, terrorist networks that were highly effective.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so AI, does it have the potential to become the Terminator? Yeah, if you give it to it. I think the governments and a lot of well-thinking people, I generally think people are good, will set things up in such a way where we don't give the red button bombing authority to a machine, and we won't go down that path, and we'll look at it to solve problems. Will we have kind of the HAL robot that has a personality and you can become friends with and shape and evolve? Yeah, I think we absolutely will, and I think it'll be phenomenal. For the people out there that maybe have some social anxiety or some of those kinds of challenges, this opens up a whole new realm of possibilities for them. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Everything from in my generation, again in the 90s, these virtual pets were all the rage. So they actually had little keychains where you had a virtual cat or a virtual dog, and if you fed the cat or the dog, or you pet the cat or the dog, it was a happy dog, and you kind of won this game or this simulation. And if you were cruel or evil to it, you got the opposite effect, and you didn't win that. So I
Yeah.
think those mechanisms will come, and I think we have a really bright future. I think we should look forward to it, and don't worry about robot overlords, but be excited about your new robot friend that's going to show up. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're super nice to your robot friend, it might help you mow your lawn.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's like I had this conversation with my girlfriend a few weeks ago about like, man, like I was like, it wouldn't be great if we could just have like an AI robotic dog, and it would just be loving and affectionate, and it would seem like a real dog, but then when we go on vacation, we just turn it off and we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to take him out to go poop or pee. We don't have to walk him. We can
Yeah,
do that stuff if we want to. I'm like, that'd be great. Like, and you have that relationship and it's affection and everything, but she's like, well, but it's not a real dog. And I'm like,
it's true.
yeah, but it's like, well, it's either biologically made or mechanically made. It does the same thing. But I'm like, I could see both sides of it.
Those discussions will kind of continue to happen. The dystopian view is that we welcome machines too much, and we lose sight of our spirituality, we lose sight of the things that truly matter. I just don't know if an artificial entity could ever replace a human being, and to that extent, I don't even think a cloned entity could ever replace a human being. I read an article about, and I'm a pet owner. I have a dog, and I love
Hmm.
my dog, and I've bonded with this member of my family so phenomenally. I have that same guilt when I go on vacation. I'm like, oh, I just feel terrible that I've left my dog by himself.
Yeah.
And so I read about this couple that cloned their cat, and they spent a fortune on it. And it felt so silly to me, because even if biologically or even electronically that's the same cat or the same dog, that sense of personality is always going to be different.
Yeah.
Unless you could perfectly replicate all of your interactions, and even if you did, those outcomes, based on chance and all sorts of other probability factors are going to be very different. So even if I had an exact clone of my dog, it wouldn't be the same dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it, ultimately gets to this question of, if you want to talk about how life will look, I think we'll have better or clearer definitions of value. And those would be better and clearer definitions of how we feel about our spirituality and where the value is, how we treat others, and how we learn and how we teach. The biggest question that I think everybody should be asking themselves when it comes to artificial intelligence is, what did you create it for? In Texas, for example, there is a huge controversy about a robot brothel that they're trying to build.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a real thing. And, I think what's fascinating about it, and I think what is encouraging about it, it really just makes me feel good about where we're going as humanity, is that this was largely rejected. Because the argument was, it doesn't matter if it's a facsimile of a human or a human, you're still mistreating. So
Yes.
it's still the moral, inaction of saying, I built this AI to abuse it.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately the courts found it as something that was illegal, and would not be allowed. So, I'm encouraged about where we're going to go. I think we're going to make really good decisions. And, whether you've got a robot dog or a real dog, I hope no one judges you and
Mm-hmm.
say, well, that's cool, you got a robot dog. Check it out, I got a real dog. Whatevs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, I think we're a long way from there, but I find this stuff just interesting to talk about.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating subject. I think students and teachers alike should look forward to where school's going to go and what it's going to look like. It'll be highly personalized. There'll be huge opportunities to conduct research that we haven't been able to do before. For the health sciences, it's really going to be a game changer in how healthy we are and how long we live.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from how you research a book or how you learn how to do a math equation to some of those other things, they're going to get easier. And as people, we're going to get more sophisticated. And hopefully we do get to that point where, someone like yourself goes through school and they say, yes, school was my favorite. And it wasn't that, it was, some of it was good. Some of it wasn't so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you think, I guess like future wise, is there going to be like, will artificial intelligence kind of be like specialized for specific tasks?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah. And that's already kind of happening.
Yeah.
That's where the market is actually succeeding, is you see different things like that.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting company called Cinnamon.
Mm-hmm.
I love that name because it's just fun to say cinnamon, and I don't know why they chose that for a technology company, but
It's like Apple. It's just tastes good, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So Cinnamon is creating this really interesting AI where it's capable of ingesting all kinds of data sets that aren't simple to kind of figure out. So imagine for a moment you're doing genealogy research, and you go to an old parish or an old city government office, and they have a filing cabinets full of records that were kept and never digitized. Well, you'd have to have a person go through each of those individual pieces of paper and scan it or somehow type it in and do that data entry, try and figure out what is what, which is which. Is it a birth record? Is it a marriage record? Is it so on and so forth? To kind of do that. Well, what Cinnamon is able to do is you could take that giant stack of paper, put it through a scanner and through OCR, it'll actually do all of that heavy lifting for you and say, well, this is a birth date. Well, this is, a death certificate. Well, this is, a marital record. And get all that data put together in a rapid way. So very, very specialized kind of subset looking at, text-based things that can get solved that way. Lenovo, I was just out at the Research Triangle looking at some of their technology for higher ed. They have templates now. So you go into a web page and you look at whatever machine learning algorithm you want to do the type of research that you want to do. Some of it is it, what is this a picture of?
Mm-hmm.
So at first you look at that and you're like, okay, well, how is that valuable? How is me understanding the difference between, a hot dog and a sandwich, or a Pop-Tart and a calzone? But essentially what that goes down the path of is things like medical research, looking at, even anthropology. I saw a really cool thing the other day with drones and AI, where they had discovered whole cities, ancient civilizations that they had walked over 100 different times and walked right past it. But because of certain ground patterns, because of certain parameters that the AI was able to recognize, it basically said, hey, here's another ancient Incan city that you didn't realize was even there right in front of your face. So all of these kinds of possibilities for knowledge and for understanding are phenomenal. And, it's exciting because we're at the point where maybe we are poised to go to Mars. Maybe we are poised to create a society where we don't have issues like hunger and energy and environmental things. And we can kind of get closer to that Star Trek utopia that we're trying to get to.
Mm-hmm. Man, it's so fun and exciting. So, and then just real quick, I have one more question about,
Yeah.
I feel positive, I think, overall about AI, but, like Elon Musk and some big guys and stuff are, caution us about it. But like,
Sure.
is the fear, like, I feel like the fear is like we say, help us solve like global warming or something. And it goes, well, you're the problem, humans, and then just gets rid of us, right? But is
Yeah.
that really a thing, or is like we just
No,
don't give them access to get rid of us, or how does that all work? I guess. What do you see it in your mind?
that's not really a thing.
Okay.
The for education, the equivalent of that fear is, well, we have determined that human beings are completely inefficient at teaching math,
Yeah.
and you can learn math much better from a piece of software. Um, that's probably true. You probably can learn how to do math really efficiently, but is that education, or is that a job? Is
Mm-hmm.
that a task? The button pushing scenario is, did you put a warhead on that drone and have no safety switch, no way of intervening and saying, okay, drone, you've made the decision that you're going to drop this bomb, but we're actually not going to drop that bomb. So we would have to intentionally let go of a lot of our own self-autonomy to go down that path.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have to make the decisions for that to happen. I'm not saying that it's impossible that somebody out there is foolishly going to do something like that. We have some early examples. Microsoft released a chat bot. It was really kind of a cool idea and a cool project, but it went wrong. It was called Tay.
Mm-hmm.
So Tay would essentially learn from the internet and become this, entity that you could have conversations with, and it would become kind of a guide based on everything that I had learned out on the web. Well, that backfired. There's a lot of content on the internet, shall we say, that does not represent the greater conscious of mankind, and so it turned into a racist chatbot almost within hours. Um,
Wow.
it issued death threats to people. And, it went off the rails in a historically bad way. Well, the experiment, they simply opened up these parameters and said, well, learn what you can. And then based off of, whatever you give this, entity, it'll just take that as truth. It'll take that as face value that this is how you behave. These are the things that you say because it saw it.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than how we choose to raise our children. If we treat other people poorly and we teach people that that's acceptable and that's no big deal, you'll start to see those things. So it has tremendous power. So if you choose to do that, there's some possibilities of some really bad things happening. I don't think that's going to happen, just because we've got some good people out there and they're making good decisions. That the European Union example I gave you, and even the Elon Musks of the world are waging caution, and they're saying, I have artificial intelligence, or machine learning, or however you want to qualify it, in my cars and my products. Mm-hmm. But essentially his warning is, there are limits, and, don't go so far where, you lose sight of what's really important, and you really kind of degrade society by going down this path. So I don't think, it's going to get that scary.
Yeah. Just be careful about it and how we build it. But is there the, I don't know, scenario where an AI can go around the kill switches that we create for it? Or is that not really popular or possible?
Tough question. I suppose it's not impossible. Okay. I'd actually love to see that movie. That would be a really awesome James Bond movie.
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of see that scenario played out. The depth of that kind of sophistication would require a couple of things. It would require, the capability to access multiple systems through multiple means and data and those sorts of things. So is it theoretically possible? Yeah. But I think we're a long ways off. Mm-hmm. The reason that I could say it's theoretically possible is you look at things like power grids, and how those are managed. And it's 100% true that, the bad guys, hackers out there have tried to, disrupt communities and nations by trying to take control of their power grids and their water purification systems and those sorts of things, because we chose to put them online. Mm-hmm. We chose to put them on the internet. So maybe we need to make some decisions where we start backing away from the Internet of Things. We start backing away from this idea that everything should be connected to the internet. And maybe that builds some safeguards to make the way for AI to be successful.
I see. Makes sense. Damn. Well, this is fun, Ryan. I love talking to you. I love this stuff.
I'm glad. Call anytime. I would love to talk more about it. It's a thrill to be on your show. I'm excited where the program's going, and I hope a lot of people get value out of kind of this. I love the notion of how many different topics you go after. I mean, it's like everything is interesting, and so I'm really thrilled and intrigued by that. So I think you've got a great concept, and I'm looking forward to seeing where everything goes.
Cool, man. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So we'll send people your book, AI 101, A Primer on Using Artificial Intelligence in Education, is on Amazon. I'll have a link for that stuff.
Great.
Anywhere else we should send people to check out your stuff?
It's super easy. You can just go to ryancameron.com. You'll find out if I'm speaking somewhere or if I'm at an event on my events page. And publications and those sorts of things are always out there and available. I just finished my second book that talks about the fourth industrial revolution and school leadership. Mm-hmm. And I can't believe it, but I've already started my third. So we're going to be looking at some other AI things as well to help educators kind of be prepared for what I think is a very bright future.
Sweet. Yeah, let's definitely do some follow-up episodes about your other books, and there's a bunch of stuff we could talk about, I'm sure, but that'd be fun.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. What I would encourage you to do, I think, would be a lot of fun. I don't know if kind of your setup is designed this way, but we should do a panel discussion, and you can kind of get maybe those folks that maybe are terrified of AI or proponents like me who are kind of advocates for the technology. The opportunity to kind of go back and forth and talk about these dimensions.
That would be fun.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna see how I can work that out and figure out a way to get that going, because that'd be cool.
Cool. You can count on me to be there.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate you being on, and have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. All right.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Yep.